Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grantek's Label Printer Control and ERP Integration from Packaging to Pallets webinar. I'm one of your hosts, Dave McKenna. My colleague Brian Hoffman and I will be talking to you, going over some of the trends that we're seeing around case labeling, product marking, and we're extending beyond further down the packaging line from case labeling and primary packaging, marking, labeling, down to pallets. And some solutions and ways we're helping customers with this again, as well as trends and where we're seeing kind of the industry moving. So before we get into it, just a few little housekeeping notes. So again, please use the chat so you can get the most out of this. We will be reviewing all the questions in the chat at the end of the presentation. We will be asking a few polls during the presentation to help us better understand who's attending this, and that can let us make a few little on-the-fly changes to this as we go. Again, as your teachers in school probably told you, please remove distractions and take notes as you go if there's something of particular interest to you. I did modify these slides myself, and now apparently marketing told me other people use them and don't always notice that these little notes have been put in. So kind of fun there. So just before we get going, who's doing this presentation? My name is Dave McKenna. I'll do a brief intro and then ask my colleague Brian too. So I'm a director at Grantek, director of Smart Manufacturing Solutions. I run our label verification program, which we've done. It's not in this presentation. We'll be talking about it, but there's several other multiple webinars we've done on it. There's YouTube content as well if you're interested in confirming that you have the correct packaging at the line. I also, in addition to label verification, run our label printer control and printing marking integration part of the business really that we're talking about today. Been in manufacturing for 20 years, various different automation opportunities, and again, saw this as a growth area and a place we could really help clients and help the industry and help the public, again, ensure there's fewer recalls and fewer issues in packaging and in supply chain. Brian?
Hi, I'm Brian Hoffman of Grantek. I'm one of the principal engineers here. Been doing this automation and everything for almost 40 years. My roles within Grantek is mainly leading for this case is Pallet Manifest, which as we refer to is the getting the information from the factory floor up into an ERP system, warehouse management system. So those I am the lead project manager and also lead a lot of the teams that end up do the Pallet Manifest. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. So this is meant to be an educational webinar. This is to talk about trends that we see and some new kind of cutting edge stuff we're doing with customers. I promise it's only 2 slides just to give a bit of context and background about who Grantek is, and then we'll get to the educational kind of part. So who's Grantek? Grantek's a system integrator, and we've been around since 1980, multiple offices across North America, and we do everything from the bottom, lower level fuses, supply components, design electrical panels, build electrical panels, so the low level machine sensor type area, up to integrating with SAP, which we're going to talk about today, integrating IIoT, which is really what we're talking about, integrating with labelers, integrating with printers, integrating cameras to connect to that, connecting all of that system to a packaging line to tell it to stop or start or run. So integrating and everything in between. So really all parts and all elements of automation and ability to provide custom solutions for customers, which we do, as well as we have several solutions like label verification and printer integration that we've really been repeating and refining and investing in on our own. Second of 2 slides on who we are. So offices across North America, East Coast, West Coast, and a little bit in the middle. And 1 remote office in India. Awesome. So before we get to some of the content that we have to talk about trends and packaging and so on, we've sort of introduced ourselves. If you can please introduce yourself. So please do click on the poll so we have some idea whether you are a quality individual, whether you're a supply chain or involved in supply chain professional, whether you're in engineering or operations, or if you are a contractor, system integrator, or an other. And I'm going to wait a tiny bit more to see if we have any stragglers. while stalling verbally to prevent dead air during the webinar. Okay, we will stop it there. So we have a mix of operations, engineering, contractors, fellow system integrators, and some others. So interesting little cross mix of people. So again, first I'm going to talk about printing and casing. That's sort of my area of deeper knowledge, and then that's really these first two that we're going to go through, and then Brian will jump in on Pallet Manifest, and then we'll talk about, okay, these are some really cool things you're talking about. Well, where and how does any of this start, and where's the point to start? How do you start? Or how do you decide even if you should start on any of this, or if it's relevant for you and your company that you're at? So first, when we say label printer control and label applicators, that can mean multiple different things. So I've got like a little bit of an introduction here. What we mean by that is any hardware that's on a line. So you may have an inkjet printer that's spraying something on a case. You may have an inkjet printer that's spraying something on film that's part of a bagged product. So it could be on primary, it could be on secondary, it could be a print and apply labeler. So you have something that's slapping a label on a bundle of product as it goes by. It's slapping a label on a case. Maybe it's putting one, maybe it's putting two. Those are most. Maybe it's a laser. That's another application where there's a spout on the packaging, and then a laser is sort of burning off some of the packaging to put what you want. Put that product information, put that code date, put whatever it is. There's a series of different ways that this goes. And what we do and what we're talking about and the trends we'll go through are managing those printers. So you're going to buy those printers from a printer company, and you may have a mix of printers in your facility already. What we're talking about is a centralized software from us that can control and communicate with all different vendors of printers that you have, and that is going to tell that printer what to put on that case label, what to put in the barcode on it, what to put on the barcode that's on the case label, what to put in the lot number if you've got one on it, what format to put if you're putting the expiration date. Is it BBE, a month, day, year, or year, month, day, or what's the format depending on the type of product that you're running? Maybe you're shipping to an overseas market and it's a different format. This is the sort of thing we're talking about with printer integration and marking. And the second piece that ties to this, again, often brownfield, mix of vendors, mix of hardwares. I just need it all sort of tied together. The second thing that comes with these almost all the time is verification, because you're doing this, you have an increased focus in your company on printing and marking because you've had a recall, because you've had stuff with the incorrect code date go out, because you have a new client, a new grocery store, a new food service customer or someone, and they have specific requirements that they need for that label. They need additional traceability information printed on it. They need a GS1 barcode on it. They need that other information. Well, anytime you're getting into printing because of those reasons, a recall or because there's new customer demands, that label is clearly important. You're doing this extra work for it. So verification becomes the next piece. Verifying that it is got the correct information, that it printed properly and it didn't smudge like crazy, or it's not turned or twisted, or the box was damaged, or something went wrong. And again, that's where we come in. So one of the two kind of major trends that we're seeing is increase in the amount of labeling, and labeling on two sides. So we are seeing significant numbers of projects with customers being asked to apply on two sides. And in many cases, that's pre-printed. You can get away with pre-printed. So that's, you've got a label applicator and your operator brings up a roll of labels with it. It's just going to have the product information because that's really all you can ever pre-print when you're running. You can't pre-print the batch number, the lot number, the code date. You can't pre-print the expiration date. And so you've got that roll, but we're seeing a lot of customers have to add that second labeler. So multiple of those added on lines being put on different places on lines for existing lines, and really being driven by end customers wanting to automate their warehouses. You have a lot of the large river named internet e-commerce type company people, and the other grocery store with the smiley face, among other companies. They're doing a lot of automation. There's a lot of automation going on, and they want to manage their inventories with automation. And so sometimes that inner label is tucked in. That's no good for automation. So significant numbers of these projects, and sometimes, as I said, it's pre-printed and you can just get in with putting a dumb kind of applicator on. And sometimes what we're seeing is this, where you do need to put a lot more information on that. And big trend, and I think most lines, to my knowledge, have sort of been completed on this, but it's starting to edge beyond this. Most food service lines have gotten this, where particularly because of FSMA 204, there's new requirements on traceability, and there's a new push for traceability. And so we're seeing a lot more, and this also ties into automating warehouses and automating handling of product at end customers. We're seeing a push for GS1 labels with lot number, expiration date, date of manufacture, product information. And again, none of that's pre-printable. So that requires new labelers, that requires often print and apply, because in some cases inkjet printing isn't meeting the quality, although I have seen some really impressive inkjet printers, in particular at one site recently, that surprised me. So there's probably new things going on in inkjet printing. But yes, this is a big one. And our leading customers have got to this, and we've helped them with these projects, either on a turnkey basis, bringing in printers and then integrating it to the line and the verification. And some other customers are really looking at this very deep and hard and long, not for food service lines, but for every single line they have. There's an anticipation that this is going to come, this is going to be mandated. Maybe we want this anyways, to just truly manage our inventory better, manage our risk better, have more accurate information in ERP, reduce the scale and size of recalls if we have any. And there's all this talk of digitization and digitizing the supply chain. Well, if your cases don't have the barcoded, computerized access, if a computer can't get the information out of it because there's no barcode on it, there's not a lot you can not nearly as much you can do. So a couple customers have major campaigns to evaluate, what if I do this on every line? What's the cost? How many printers do I need to add? How many do I have already? What's my networking going to be involved in this? So this is where we're seeing, again, it's been done in food service and starting to see it's inching into everything. I don't think it's there maybe this year or next, but there's a real anticipation from the quality leaders we deal with that this is coming and will be coming. So that's kind of case labeling, big trends that we see. Two labels, two sides being a big need. The other I mentioned, in addition to GS1 128, is some end customers, so food manufacturers, their customers, are requiring custom or specific labels. So you've got a GS1 128 with all sorts of stuff. Well, that customer that's buying a large number of those wants their own specific information on it. They want their logo on it. They want some additional pieces of information on it. So again, because you can pack a lot of stuff in a GS1 128 and it varies on how much you choose to put in. We are seeing that, which makes for an even harder case for manufacturers, because now it's not just a printer which needs to get the correct information entered into it each run. It's going to vary by SKU even more so. So challenges we're seeing customers face, and challenges we're helping them with, because I mean, if you're adding all this, you do want to automate it. Your operators have enough to do without having to fight with all these additional labeling kind of requirements. So that's kind of case labeling and where we see things going. And I'm going to have Brian take it over to talk more about, after that case is rolled down the conveyor and gotten to a palletizer, and what happens then, and what are trends we're seeing and steps we're taking with leading customers on pallet labeling and pallet management.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, this is where we're talking about where you all that hard work and everything else in the plant to make the product, you eventually put it on a pallet and ship it out. And what we're going to try and do is cover a lot of the issues and problems that we've seen and everything with our customers, and some of the ways they've tried to solve it, and some of the ways we've tried to help them solve it. So here we'll go to the next slide. And this is like out of a study last year and everything, which is really interesting, is that we see inventory problems are $1.1 trillion is what they saw annually is being lost. It's causing the economy. And we have a large number of customers that we've experienced that, where they've actually had operators, different processes not followed properly, and now they've got material, they don't know where it is. They've lost it, or they've, there's issues in their accounting system, and the accounting is what makes us the money in the plants and everything. So that has to be as accurate as possible. And a lot of that all stems from that manual data entry that we see with the operators, or they end up not following the process, or there's something wrong in it. We don't have a way to go back and double check even what's happening on the floor. So those are a lot of things all leading into this. So here, if we go to the next slide.
Before we do, just to add
Yeah.
one personal story. So there was a period of time where at a plant, as part of an SAP implementation, I was there as the SAP police, or the person to make sure inventory was accurate and production of finished goods was accurate and inventory of packed material and so on. And it was brutal to undo something in SAP. And I'm going to say that it's not built for undoing stuff. It's built to have records. It's built to track everything nicely. And the amount of trouble that came for me just to undo that of a double counted, of a ghost pallet or double counted pallets, the amount of trouble that created for supply planning and so on, and scheduling if someone had double reported a pallet, was big. And then now double counting that pallet, SAP is going to consume all the backflush, or most likely consume all the packaging material that went into making that, and your film and your cases and shipper cases and cartons and whatever. And now that's all going to be wrong because that pallet wasn't actually made. And now you're fixing that later, but you've already done a cycle count to count inventory. So now that's off. So it is brutal in a site if you get finished good pallets wrong, because it's going to muck everything else up downstream, upstream and downstream of that finished good.
No, which is a valid point, because a lot of people want to know where all this is going and what is going wrong, and a lot of that we'll get into. But one of the things, just to make aware, what we refer to as Pallet Manifest, is I just want to give a little bit of an idea so people are aware a little bit of more what we see as a lot of the standard manual processes that are out there. You have the palletizer that ends up finishing, takes all those cases, those products, and puts it on a pallet, because that pallet's the most important thing, because that's what you're shipping to your customers. And generally there's a label that's been printed off some other system that the operator manually applies to that. And then from that, they end up manually entering in data that goes along with that into your ERP, your warehouse, your SAP system. And we can't find the number of times that, hey, the wrong label was applied, or the incorrect quantity was applied, or what's even worse, we've had, like, as we're talking examples, I have a customer that made the mistake that the operator labeled, 2 truckloads of pallets incorrectly, and they got shipped across the border from the United States to Canada. Well, that was 2 truckloads they had to throw away because an operator just picked up the wrong roll of labels and was applying them. So, because again, when it gets to the warehouse is assuming that label is accurate. That label that's on there, that's the one they're using to know what to ship. So these are a lot of the issues that we see. And what we've tried to do with a lot of our customers and everything, as we go on to the next slide, is we look into, we try and automate the system. And this is where we're trying to improve the accuracy. Instead of, let's talk to the palletizer directly. Let's talk to the case packer. Let's get the information. As Dave was talking very earlier, most of our customers are putting case labels on every one of them that tells you what batch, because like for certain customers, for example, they're not allowed to mix batches. You can't put 2 different batches on the same pallet. So, hey, they might be that you've got a barcode there, it's verifying it's the right SKU, but are you actually verifying it's the right batch? Little details like that. And then it also gets in, for those with SAP and everything, you have to apply this to a process order. You enter in the plant is producing some order against. Are those cases going against the correct one? So there's a lot of things that we do here to improve that accuracy. And getting the label on the pallet to make sure that everything matches up. And then we talked about, a lot of the customers, as Dave mentioned earlier, that a lot of customers are requiring. We've got one customer that's up to the point that they need 4 pallet labels on the same one. That is an end requirement of the customer. Well, who can fit 4 labelers in the same location? So they were having issues as far as that one side of the pallet had one label, the other side had a completely different label. So, which was giving them problems. So as these customers are asking for this, you've got to put solutions in and everything that solve and fix those problems, because as Dave talked about, when you start putting information into SAP wrong, it usually takes a meeting with about 10 different people to try and figure out, okay, what do we do to get this corrected? And and if it goes on for a while, like at some of our customers, I mean, I know one of our customers is actually Phantom Pallets. They ended up in their system almost $500,000 worth of Phantom Pallets that they didn't have. And this can add up very quickly where you're just letting a manual process go. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things we talk about is automating it. And this is just to give you a real simplified little version how this can go. But basically, you have your palletizer finishes producing some product. Well, hey, you've got basically, you need to let SAP, your ERP system, know, hey, I have 54 cases of XYZ. Well, goes against process order such and such. There's a batch number that goes with it. There's the G10 as far as all that information that goes with this. Yeah, that's easy to send it up. But the whole thing that we run into is your ERP system goes down, your SAP goes down, something happens. And so you need to cover those. So, because when the whole system's working, hey, that's great. SAP's okay. Let's print a label and everything else that has all that information that customer requires, and we'll apply it on a pallet and verify that it's all correct. But when SAP is down and everything, you don't stop your plant. When your ERP system goes down, you're not going to stop producing. And some of the things like we've done with a lot of our customers is print a temporary label that goes onto the pallet. It has the information that they need to know to go back and say, hey, this is what the information is on here. This is when it was produced, so that they can scan that, put a GS1 label right on it, that they can sit there and scan it and go right into the system, or make a very easy correction for when SAP comes back. Or in many cases, we save all that information so that when SAP comes back alive or your ERP system comes back alive, oh, you produced 40 pallets during that time? We're going to send all 40 pallets up, because you can't stop production. That's one of the things when you look at this, production still has to continue on. You can't just stop it. And you have to put systems in for that. As we like to say, you don't want to put a system in that handles just the golden path, which means everything is good, everything is nice and happy. You want to put a system in that handles when things are going wrong. And that's what's really important.
I think in many
And
cases, SAP
yeah,
is critical to companies' businesses, and they have a lot of highly paid, highly trained people, and they're going to keep it. It's rare, probably, in many companies that it would truly go down, but that's not to say there's not 100 different issues that could happen that stop that production from being reported. Things like the process orders aren't valid, or somebody didn't schedule something properly, or some material has some kind of issue on it in master data in SAP. So everything else will work, but this one product can't be produced properly until someone comes in and clicks some checkbox somewhere to do something. So 100% right, Brian. You need to be able to run, and there's a million ways things can go wrong, but you still need to get that pallet somewhere and have a record of it and have the right information on it without anybody using a marker or a clipboard or any of that.
yeah, which also goes in the same thing as far as where do you get that information from and everything. You want to eliminate as much manual entry as possible, because anytime we're all human beings, it doesn't matter what level you're at, somebody's going to make a typo. Somebody's going to do that. And you have to have some kind of method to go along with that. And that's where, again, it's really nice if you can tie back into the palletizer, or if you can tie upstream and get the information. For example, we talked earlier about the printers. I mean, every one of your products, you have to put a date code on it. You have to do it. It's really nice if we can tie all those systems together. When you think about a solution, you want to tie those all together, that, hey, what's upstream is matching what's downstream, that you have that tie-in. You just don't put a series of islands of information out there that you don't know what upstream is doing versus downstream. So you think about it just at the pallet, but it's also very important that, hey, that batch information that's on that label that you put on the pallet better match the batch information that's on every one of your products that are on there also.
And better match the packaging that it was put in the first place. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. The next slide here, and just to show as far as what can go wrong and everything else, it's like, hey, just print a label, just talk to SAP, get some information. This is something, a process that we put together for one of our customers. And to give you an idea, this is a small piece of it. But we actually wanted to go through the workflow and actually determine where do we get the information. And most of this is handling when things are going wrong. Because it's really just the green boxes and everything else we call the golden path as far as, hey, just go up to SAP, send the information, you're done. But there's all those things that can go wrong and everything else, how to handle SAP going out or your ERP system having issues to keep that line running. So this is like a great little example as far as that you really want to take a deep dive into your system and just not look at that golden path. You want to really look at how everything can go wrong. Like for example, my favorite one is partial pallets. Everybody completely forgets at the end of the production run, hey, we don't have enough material to make a full product, a full pallet. What do we do with that? You wouldn't believe the number of people that we run across that never considered that. What do they do at that point? And so that's one of the things when you actually look at a solution, you want to really end up having a workflow and figuring out all those kind of solutions. And this is where we just want to throw out a little bit of example of what those sort of look like and should look like.
And to add, and this is something I really, and I think some may disagree, but customizing and being able to customize a solution in a system is often what I found where you get the most business value out of it. Because if you could make things really fit how your
Yep.
lines work and how you need to supply to your customers, then the automation can really be at its finest and do everything and do all those handle those weird quirk and weird situations that you have, and the automation can really make people's lives easiest and help you run the fastest and with fewer errors. And
No, that's an extremely good point because you talked back to SAP with that. We do this at quite a few facilities, and everybody uses SAP slightly different. Everybody does little things that are different. Trying to get off the shelf solutions that handle this, they go like, no, you got to match what that off the shelf solution does versus what we try and do is like match what you do. Just to
yep.
Dave's point.
I mean, one customer I was at, it was a dairy customer, and they had incredibly complicated business rules. You wouldn't think milk would be the most complicated stuff to put in milk cases, but man, if it was certain customers, they had to go a height limitation on their pallets because of that customer's warehousing and racking. Other customers had a different height limitation because they went on trucks that went in certain regions of the country, and those highways weren't rated for that size of truck. Other companies had other products they were producing. Was the shelf life sort of would vary with some seasonality, among other. It was complicated. And never mind if it was a had some change to the formulation. I mean, complex business roles. Anyone in manufacturing is gonna say the same. There's quirks. There's uniquenesses to their business, and the ability to customize how you're handling your finished goods, which is really what it's all about, uh, can let us automate and get let you get the most from this.
Okay. And then, yeah, just to give you why choose Grantek for all this. Again, we've got well over 15 years of experience doing this with our customers and a wide range of them. We've integrated with SAP, ERP, warehouse, MES systems, because again, you got to get the information from the factory floor up into one of those systems as accurately as possible. And again, the overall goal is to reduce that inaccuracies that you're going to get in that inventory because again, just as we saw $1.1 trillion, we're seeing this every week that we're getting customers that are having issues their inventory doesn't match because of just little mistakes that happen that add up. And then there's the other benefits. I mean, you want to eliminate as that much manual data entry as possible. That's what we try and look at. I mean, again, back to Dave's point, if your cases have the information already barcode on it, why do double entry? Let's pull the information directly off the cases. You know, allowing that pallet labeling. Let's get rid of that manual labels because this is really again as customers are asking for more labels. They're asking for very specific labels. It's like Dave's talking like with the milk and everything. I've got quite a few other customers I know that every one of their pallet labels, oh, this is going to XYZ customer. They need this pallet label. It's going to ABC. They want this on it. We're seeing those differences. and you can't, send out someone there to keep changing over things. You need that to happen automatically. And then one of the other biggest things we do is a second source. Your ERP has an inventory. It has some kind of information, but how do you know that's correct? You have to wait until you walk out there and say, hey, there should be 150 pallets of this product out there. Huh, I only got 100. What happened? Or I've got 200. And that's one of the things, we create that second source, another set of reports. And the more we're tied in the line, we actually, in some of our customers, we know the serial numbers of every one of the cases that is per pallet. So they can walk up and go to, hey, the label fell off, or we lost, this says it's supposed to be XYZ product, but it's not. Well, we just scan one of the serial numbers, and we can go through the system and say, hey, that pallet was actually this a while ago. It was restacked. And you can say, we run into cases where they combine pallets, or something fell off one pallet, a pallet broke, and they sort of restacked it back together. We can give those second sources of information to allow them that you wouldn't get out of SAP or an ERP system. And again, real time, we have customers again where it's the cases heading to the palletizer. They're like, hey, there's an issue with SAP. It's not accepting this. A process order is closed, or there's an issue. This material was not entered into the ERP SAP system correctly. We're sending email alerts within 30 seconds to the line supervisor that, hey, you got an issue here. Let's get this fixed before it's the end of the shift, or it's the next day before you're like, oh, it's too late, we already got this into SAP. And we've had meetings with 10 people going like, all right, someone needs to approve deleting this inventory out and rechanging it around. So trying to those real time is very important. Okay, and then the next slide. All right, and I think we're at the poll here as far as to try and get an idea. What we're after here is a little bit just trying to give the idea of struggles that your company is currently facing. Incorrect information, labeler printer issues, having old equipment. Because that's one of the biggest things we try and do is integrate into existing lines. Because to be honest, most of the systems we do are already existing. And then it's like customers wanting more labels. Again, as I kid you not, I have a customer, as far as they want 4 labels, one under the shrink wrap and then 3 sides. And it's like, or you're seeing they want different ones based on who you're shipping to and everything.
I know you're funny, your 4 label story, because I remember at one customer, they kept redesigning the labels to make them longer with more peelies, so you could pull off the handling unit number, the SSCC. But then as the rollout across the company completed, the labels were this long, and then later they started getting longer, and then later they started getting longer because there was not just people wanted a lot of those stickers on them. So I can see maybe the 4 labels comes from like we need more stickers to peel off, but it's wild.
Oh, it's that, and the pallets get turned around and everything else. What faces? They don't want the driver to get off, the lift truck driver to get off and scan this and that. But even that 4th one, as we're talking about, that's a nightmare for the customer because it's an existing line that it's like there's no place for a 4th labeler. There's no. So we had to go way downstream to put it at a different location. But then you got to have a scanner to make sure, hey, that what you're putting on there, is exactly the same one. Because in this case, it's a mixed product line too. So you've got different product lines coming down, different material numbers. So they're completely different products on each skid. So the fun challenges. But
okay, well, thanks for the answers. And I think I'm seeing a mix of incorrect ERP info, and I'm seeing some printer applicators. So I'm seeing quite a bit of old equipment, and old is a funny word. There seems to be a mix of some of this printing labeling is updatable, and you can kind of add more modules and pieces like that to network it. Sometimes you can't, but it's sort of really case by case. But thanks for answering the poll. And so and Brian, thank you for kind of run through on Pallet Manifest. So now what? Where do we get started? Yeah, you can verify all these things all the way down from the start to the end of the line. And update the labelers, automate the labelers, or no, leave it with USB keys and people walking around and operators doing a whole bunch of this, or maybe this if your keypad is small on your code data. Where do you start? Really with the best business value, the greatest business value. And what we've seen, how we've seen customers be successful with getting funding and internal projects and initiatives going ahead to address this is a couple ways. So one is around recalls. If there is a recall, if there's been recall around incorrect packaging being used, if there's recalls around incorrect date and code date and date format, those make their own business case. The cost of that recall is generally going to be known in the company, the number that's been happening, how many have been happening, and that's absolutely can help make a strong case for automation, in particular around like these systems are not new. And what we're hearing is there's kind of more and more pressure from regulatory agencies like the FDA that if you don't have anything in, it's like, well, yeah, you're required to manage the code date. You're not required to have a camera there and a scanner, but everyone else has kind of got scanners on this now, and you've had an issue. So what are you doing? But that's a big case around primary packaging. Is around again, recalls is really the primary driver, and 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 there's some new opportunities. There's some new hardware and new cameras that use machine learning and some sort of tipping the toe into AI technologies that can definitely do that a lot stronger than previously. The middle one, where we're around case labeling and case requirements, primarily we see that because of immediate need. You have a customer, a food manufacturer has a grocery customer, a food service customer that says, we have to have this, period. We need it. And to get our business to run that business, you're going to need to put this label on the line. You're going to need to put this information on it. And that's primarily where we see it. But as I stated, some large food companies that we deal with are forward seeking and forward thinking and anticipate this is going to kind of be a bigger company wide thing, really just in a matter of time. On the pallet side, this one has its own very strong business case around, because the value of a pallet is so high, because people lose their minds when finished goods accuracy is wrong, because plant managers have their targets and their quota for production and all this, and when finance comes in at the end of the month and does an inventory or an audit or sets up closes the books, and someone had to write down like 10 pallets or whatever number it was, that's a huge punch in the face. So that one is its own strong case because again, there's just so many dollars at stake at the end with that end finished good product. And anything else anyone's trying to do to automate supply chain, to do advanced planning and greater scheduling, and all of this hinges on actually knowing what you produced and entering it properly. And so that we've seen, again, customers have kind of strong business cases built from those errors. And nicely that you're in finished goods, everything's kind of got a dollar value, or someone's able to see the dollar value in your ERP. Maybe you're not have access to that, but it's there. So again, those are where we see customers having strong business cases around ERP, or other ERP upgrades, updates needing being a chance to also update on the plant floor. So that's kind of our presentation. Again, we've kind of gone through the trends that we're seeing around case labeling. We're going to see some of the business values and drivers around pallet tracking, automation of pallet labeling. And now Brian picked this happy face heart thing, so we all smile. And we'll take some questions. So let me look into the correct window of my screen. Okay, first question. How do you deal with mixed pallets or lot numbers or batch codes? And I will ask Brian Hoffman to talk to that one.
Yeah, as far as it varies on the system, as far as that we have some customers that allow it to mix, or we have other ones as far as that where it's, hey, when that batch changes, that needs to be what we call that partial pallet again, that you need to kick it out and everything. We have some customers that do accept, as far as their ERP system will accept both batch numbers. We can, when we send up, hey, this is the SSCC number, it also contains both batches on it, or it might be 3 batches on it, depending on how they're doing it. So it's really customer driven, but we've actually seen a large range of different solutions depending on what your needs are.
Awesome.
Does
Thank
that
you,
sort of
Brian.
help?
Second question, how do you interface with SAP? And I can kind of say the ways I've seen and I've done, and then Brian, you'll probably add 5 more. So as required, as needed. What I've the what I've seen is typically customers with SAP will generally have their own fairly serious IT departments and their own fairly serious SAP people. This generally isn't the first interface to anything that they've had to do before by any means. So most large corporate companies will have some standard and some preferred way of doing that. So the ones I've run into has been SAP, and maybe this is going back a little, but some have been SAP PI, some have been XMII. In some cases, we've gone direct with .NET connector. So those are, again, particular technologies, but really highly selected, vetted by customer IT people who, because they own the keys. They have the keys to SAP. They have the access. They're going to grant the service accounts to let anything connect or not connect. They have to maintain that connection ultimately because it does kind of hinge into SAP, and so they'll come with some standard. Where we've been flexible is where we can be flexible. So we've done flexible applications where pick your way of doing it, customer, and then we'll work out how we integrate with that, how we push to you, what we do if you how do we know that you got something and or didn't get it, what do we do, where do we put to display the exceptions to that, and kind of handle that. But those are the approaches I've seen, Brian.
Yeah, as far as, I mean, I haven't had a customer that's really done it the same way
Yeah.
twice. So to be honest, because it varies on what your system is, how it's set up. And as Dave said, it's been direct. Or we've gone through, hey, they have a standard where they want to use a third-party package, which could be SnapLogic, MuleSoft, Business Connector. We've got one that's going through Amazon MQ now. As far as it's SOAP, it's web services, it's all sorts of different methods. And it's really what makes the most sense for the customer, to be perfectly honest. We want to give them, as far as, because to be honest, the interacting with SAP, that's where more of your money is actually spent, because that's your accounting system. There's so much testing. Certain customers require us to go through, 3 layers of tests before we go up there. We have customers that want 5 layers of tests. But that's all because this is your accounting system. If you all of a sudden put in accidentally 100 pallets that don't exist, that causes a lot of problems. Or you fail, which is worse, to even record information correctly. So there's a lot of testing that goes along with before we communicate to SAP through the different methods we do.
Awesome.
So, because that data has to be accurate.
Next question. How much space do your labeling systems take up on the production floor? I'll say variable, and with the little caveat of we take, we'll certainly engage with, and we can do complete turnkey, so it can be kind of our labeling. We're not a builder of labeling machines. We work with other leading labeling companies and labeling marketing companies,
Mhm.
and can help customers select the right vendor, or can, again, turnkey. So we are buying that labeler and installing it for you. But how much space does it take? And I'm going to say it varies. It depends on the type of applicator, depends on is it print and apply, is it printing on the side, how it's
Mhm.
completely dependent. What's the size of the label you're putting on? What's the size of the carton or case you're putting on? What's the speed is gonna make some kind of changes on some of this. Brian's probably a better one, but it varies.
Yeah, yeah, it's, again, we like to pick what, you have experience. We have experience with pretty much all the major labeling companies. So it's a matter of what makes the most sense. Again, we change what technology we use based on what is the best, the easiest for the plant to support, the easiest to integrate within your existing system, what makes the most sense. So, yeah, it's sort of a to be honest, everybody wants the smallest footprint possible. Let's be honest, because plant floor space is a
Mhm.
premium. So, and that's where we've had to come up with some unique systems and everything in cases for that reason. But it varies.
Next question. What do you do if SAP is down? How do you deal with that? SAP down. Maybe Brian?
Yeah, yeah. For the most of our customers, the way we work with it is we continue to let the plant run. Like for example, is we'll have a pre-list of the SSCC numbers. So we might have like 1,000 stored on site that we don't need to pull from your ERP system warehouse that we can pull from. And from that, as we just start feeding those out, and we call it store and forward. We basically, hey, it's down. Let's just keep running. We build up a list of everything that was made during that time. It could be down for only 10 minutes, or we've had it down where it's been for 12 hours. And then when it comes back alive, then that store and forward information starts getting sent up. And meanwhile, you have all the reports available that you can see what's going on and what's happening as far as without those connections. So that you have a real time window of what's happening and you're just not, is it working or not? So we have all sorts of alarms to tell people on the floor. And that's again where we talked about we print even on the pallet labels, we do temporary labels because sometimes we want to make sure that here the SAP accepted it. So we'll print out all the information, but we put on big letters SAP was down, and so that they know that they have to replace that label later, that it doesn't quite go out that way, but it still has all the information in there as if it was to go to the ERP SAP systems.
Awesome. And really customer driven. And I'm going to say that's there is another option to this if a customer wants that. And I've seen systems where this is going to say, I'm going to say more regulatory environment, more pharmaceutical environment than kind of a food environment, where if SAP is down, then you kind of need to halt because that is their system of record. They do need all that information entered in right away as production's happening, and they want, the company wanted to enforce pauses in production if they were unable to enter it. Now that's not in any way usually how any food and drug or consumer products or other things are going to work, where they're totally happy to enter it in afterwards. But yeah, if you are in that crucial regulatory environment where you need to halt, then you could.
Yep.
All right, that is the last question that we've got, and we are a little bit early, but we'll give you a little bit of back time, a little bit of time back, as they say it. Thank you very much again to everyone who's attended, and any of you who do. Obviously, you did register because you're here to hear this. Anyone who registered is going to be sent a recording of this session. If you do have any other questions, please email info@grantek.com. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Brian.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your
Bye-bye.
time.